Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. Wow, as the title of this video suggests, we're discussing the quote-unquote medical establishment. This is a video that started off in my mind one way when I first read some of the articles I'm going to quote herein. But it started off, basically, I was thinking about the whole cannabis issue here in Thailand, and then it just mushroomed out into something bigger, and I'll tell you why. Personally, I've sort of compartmentalized in my own brain the events that occurred from roughly Q1, at the end of Q1 of 2020, up through roughly the end or thereabouts of 2022, and even going into 2023. Basically, the so-called lockdowns and everything associated with the so-called pandemic. And I use the word so-called because although I don't have definitive answers regarding anything that occurred during this time period, one thing I am definitely aware of and sure of is the fact that things were over-exaggerated. Numbers, statistics were obfuscated. We were not, as a people around the world, this isn't a Thailand-specific thing. This was going on in the US. In fact, I would argue, I think Brett Weinstein from the Dark Horse podcast here on YouTube talked about at one point the fact that the worst disinformation, misinformation, whatever you want to call it, seemed to emanate actually from the US outward. It was not sort of inward pointing toward the US. It sort of emanated outward from the US. And I thought that was a very valid sort of observation. And again, I've compartmentalized this, and I have not liked the idea of pointing fingers at folks, especially here in Thailand, because I kind of viewed this as an outside phenomenon. And I felt like the Thais were acting in good faith, but that all of us here in Thailand were in many ways misled. Let's put it that way. You know, perhaps malicious deceit. I don't know if I quite have enough evidence, even in my own mind, to exactly presume that. Although, as each passing day goes by, I'm starting to really wonder, because the whole phrase safe and effective seems to almost be an ironic cliche at this point. Let's just leave it there. That said, what are we talking about in this video? What got me thinking of this? I thought of making this video after reading a recent article from the Thai Examiner. That's thaiexaminer.com. Article is titled "Condemnation of Previous Pot Policy from Medical Experts as Thailand's Pot Shops Are Set to Close." First off, Thailand's pot shops are not set to close. Lawmakers are discussing changes to the law and how such changes would be promulgated under due legislative process here in Thailand. Okay? Can we be a little more clear when we're talking about this issue, rather than the sensationalist hyperbole and, quite honestly, the disingenuous information? Because it's not what's happening here. First off. Secondly, medical experts, what is this? And we'll get into this, but first off, let's just talk generally about the logical fallacy of what's called appeal to expertise, where you basically say, well, these people are experts and this is what they say, so just do it. If you didn't learn your lessons from COVID about how terrible a philosophy that is for making one's own rational judgments around one's own health, I don't know what to do for you. You know, because at the end of the day, I'm going to put a link in the description below to a clip, if you will, that Jimmy Dore made over on his channel regarding Fauci and how, you know, apparently lie is a kind of a weak word. I mean, this is somebody that went on a campaign of dishonesty, quite honestly, to, I don't know why, to push a medical protocol so that they could make money off of it. Was it just a power trip? Did we end up in sort of a feedback loop of, you know, sort of a negative feedback loop? Was it mass formation psychosis? Was it all of the above? You know, hard to say on that, but what I do know, and what's becoming increasingly clear, is that there were many actors throughout the world, and we'll get into this here in a minute, because I don't know, but I often wonder if maybe some of these folks were here in Thailand too, and I talked about it back at the time. Again, I haven't wanted to talk about this particularly, but when you appeal to medical experts, I got to bring up a retort, because all this medical expertise, I don't know where it got us other than shutting down our economy for 3 years, taking away tons of civil liberties of people for no good reason. that I can see, other than, quite frankly, an exaggerated cold and flu season, it seems to me. Okay, and I think that statistics bear that out. And now we're starting to see the statistics of the so-called vaccine, which I say so-called because prior to this whole thing, the term vaccine had a different definition. The CDC changed the definition in the United States of what a vaccine is. In any event, again, getting into this, Thailand's Minister of Public Health aims to shut down pot shops, reclassifying flowers and buds as Category 5 narcotics. First off, I love that one where they said, well, we're going to allow stems and all of the seeds and everything. So none of the stuff anybody wants to buy, none of the reason that this was done in the first place, you know, that's like, and again, I've said this before and I'll say it again, if they can just unilaterally classify the flowers of one plant as a narcotic, what keeps them from coming down like a brickbat on florists? I know that sounds somewhat absurd, but it's not really. You know, again, this was delisted under emergency power, and as I've said before, I would love to see some kind of court adjudication as to whether or not, without emergency power, they can relist it. That seems to me to be a really good question. Secondly, though, you know, just so what? A group of people can just get together, you know, half a dozen, whatever it is, and they get together and just say, well, now tulips are narcotics. What keeps them from doing that? Again, I've been all for a promulgated law, actual legislation, actual regulation, not just we say so, therefore you're going to do this. Sorry, that just doesn't seem reasonable under the circumstances. There's no exigent need, there's no emergency, people aren't being killed left and right from this stuff. Meanwhile, the stuff the so-called medical experts said was so safe and effective, well, go out and look at the statistics for yourself on that, folks. Quoting further, medical experts condemn previous cannabis policy, citing a surge in psychiatric cases. New stricter medical cannabis regime proposed. Here's a question for you. How many psychiatric cases come about as a result of the abuse of alcohol? Seriously. And how much health damage is done by alcohol? My big question to these medical experts, who we're now starting to see these medical experts, at least in an international context, turned out to have a financial incentive in pushing the protocols associated, I'm going to call them protocols. I don't like using the word vaccine at this point because I don't think I think it's a bit disingenuous, frankly. Again, the CDC changed the name, changed the term, changed the definition. When in doubt, in a very Bolshevik manner, when in doubt, change the meaning of words. That's the way you get things done. You know, so again, these protocols that they told people they had to get, but now they say, well, we never told you you had to do it, except for the fact you said you take away everyone's ability to feed themselves and go about their business if you didn't do it. So let's leave that aside. But you said it was safe and effective, and it's turning out that that's not quite the case. One, that's a big one. You know, and again, it was the medical experts that said this stuff. And now these same medical experts, well, perhaps not necessarily the same, although I wonder, and I'll get to that in a minute, but again, medical experts are now telling us that, oh, because before they were telling us, oh, it kills people, except it doesn't. Now they're saying, well, we have psychiatric events. Okay, again, I state again, how many times have people gotten drunk and basically you could call them temporarily insane? You know, what is that? Psychiatric event? Come on, seriously. And then I have to wonder, again, big alcohol, big pharma, they got big pockets. Are these medical experts in any way incentivized to have this opinion? Quoting further, as the Ministry of Public Health moves toward a resolution, and yet the title says pot shops are set to close. They're not the same thing. Moves toward a resolution to the various issues, it appears that the pot shops are doomed. Who said? You say? I don't see it. A grace period will certainly be given while flowers and buds will be rescheduled as Category 5 narcotics. Again, the reason people were buying this stuff to begin with, that's the product. Yes, there are other byproducts and side products and tertiary products, hemp, for example, CBD oils, these things like this. But again, these flowers, that's the circus, that's the show, that's the big show, if you will. At the same time, a new effective regime for private cannabis medical use will be established. Well, again, yeah, they want to bring it into this rubric of medical. Again, and we've seen this the last few years. The medical establishment, if you will, wants to pull all of us in under a control regime where they tell us what's healthy, they tell us what's good for us, and they tell us what to do. And if you don't believe me, look back the last 5 years. That's exactly what they did. It's exactly what they tried, and the reasoning for it was flawed, and that's why they failed. But now they're continuing to try to do this to us all, to tell us what to do all the time, because they're the medical experts. It comes with strong inputs over the last 10 days from the medical establishment. Yeah, I'll bet it does. Again, the medical establishment. Whenever you start hearing the word establishment, start being worried. Quoting further, in short, it has castigated the previous government for its actions. Oh, it's castigated. A bunch of shrinks got together and castigated the prior government. Neat. You know, again, the verbiage here makes it sound like one thing, but when you really break it down, it's like, oh, so a group of docs who may or may not be financially incentivized to have an opinion against this product, and who, by the way, I didn't see anything from the last couple of years, and who seem to have now magically popped up out of the woodwork when we need a pretext to go ahead and come down on cannabis like a brickbat. They just magically appear and castigate the prior government. Significantly, a submission by 63 respected and named doctors claims that psychiatric treatment linked to cannabis has subsequently exploded. In addition, the president of the Medical Association of Thailand described the current situation as a quote-unquote mess with pot shops on every corner. Well, you know what? Freedom is a little messy. I don't know what to tell you. You know, we don't all have to be on the leash of a bunch of doctors for the rest of our born days. And then meanwhile, again, 63 respected and named doctors claim that psychiatric treatment linked to cannabis has subsequently exploded. Okay, so 63 respected and named doctors in the psychiatric field. Now here's a good question. Again, putting up that Jimmy Dore clip, so you see sort of the American counterpart to this whole issue. Again, I'm going to put that in the link below, in a link in the description below. I urge folks who are watching this video, go check out that in detail so you can see the levels of, quite honestly, deception that went into this. Now, again, I'm not quite certain that there were anything near those levels of deception that were occurring here in Thailand, because, again, I think folks were trying to operate in good faith, and they were essentially operating off of information they thought was valid. So I've tried to kind of not want to blame folks here over this, because I think they were acting in good faith. But I'm starting to question that when it comes to this issue here. In any event, I went over and Dr. Tawison, if anybody remembers, Dr. Tawison was sort of the Dr. Fauci here in Thailand with the message of the whole COVID pandemic and how we all had to lock down and, you know, wear masks, which again, that was another one that was somehow effective. Not at all. The studies have come out. We know this. None of this stuff, none of these protocols were warranted. It really was, it looked to me like something akin to a power grab. I don't know. Maybe it was just, again, mass formation psychosis. People, you know, humanity doesn't really have a memory, and from time to time they just sort of get sucked into these vortexes, if you will, of negative feedback, and maybe that's what happened. But again, there were those who were egging this all on, and I gotta say that Dr. Tawison would, in my mind, go to the top of that list. And quoting from the Bangkok Post, BangkokPost.com, article is titled, Tawison Tops Reshuffle of Senior Health Officials. The cabinet on Tuesday appointed Tawison Wisanayutin, an inspector general at the Public Health Ministry, as the ministry's deputy permanent secretary as part of the reassignment of senior officials proposed by the ministry, which takes effect on October 1. Dr. Tawison has been a familiar sight to viewers during televised daily updates on the coronavirus pandemic, as he also serves as spokesman for the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration. Dr. Tawison was once a spokesman for the Department of Mental Health before assuming a similar role in the ministry, which kind of begs the question, why is a psychiatrist heading up an infectious disease or a campaign against an infectious disease? And again, I would love to know, is he one of the psychiatrists named in this letter? And again, if so, I'm really starting to wonder, are these psychiatrists trying to sort of manipulate the public toward what they want the outcome to be? And are they incentivized in any way toward gaining that outcome, toward seeing that outcome come to fruition? It's a good question. Going over to wikipedia.org under the entry for him, quoting directly, after his graduation from Konkan University, he had worked at Nakhon Ratchasima Psychiatric Hospital for 2 years. Afterwards, he studied at the Somdet Chowpraya Institute of Psychiatry and worked as a psychiatrist and lecturer there until 1994. Again, I don't know if he's on this list, but I don't think it is disingenuous in any way to bring up the fact that during the COVID thing, which, okay, under the best definition, you would call it an over-exaggeration of a massive scale, to not connect these two things analogically. You know, there is an analogy here. There's a connection here. There's a common thread, and that is psychiatrists telling the public, we know what's good for you, and therefore you need to do it. And I don't really see that that's the underlying truth, that this is good for the country, because Thailand has benefited from the cannabis industry. I love how they just dismiss all of the retail level, for lack of a better term, the low level, not the huge money, not big money organizations. No, a lot of little people have benefited from this. Now, at the same time, you know, I thought about, I'm for licensing. I want to be very clear. I'm for regulation. Again, I would like to see a promulgated law and then licensing regulations stemming therefrom. I don't like this idea that we just tell you what it is. Also, something I brought up in another video, where I said, should there be a constitutional court ruling on this? I had colleagues tell me that, hey, that's probably not going to be what happens. We're probably going to see a large influx of cases within the Thai administrative court because, look, these initial controlled herb licenses that granted the ability to do what these shops are doing now, those were issued with a 3-year validity. So how can they just come in without a promulgated law and abrogate those licenses? I would think that would be a major question for at least the administrative court. Again, being a layperson when it comes to Thai law, I'm not sure if that's a constitutional court issue, the whole issue of promulgated law versus just we're changing the ministerial regulations because we say so. I don't think they have the ability to do that. But again, I don't know who would adjudicate that. But long story short, if you have a license for one of these shops, one would think the proper venue for them just saying, well, we're not going to respect that license anymore, would be the admin court, would be the administrative court. That said, as much as I am in favor of licensing, there are some arguments to be made that maybe that has its own set of problems. I thought of that issue when I was reading a recent article from the Bangkok Post. BangkokPost.com article is titled, Cannabis Backers Urge Minister Not to Turn Back Clock. Dozens of cannabis advocates urged the government on Thursday to abandon its plans to relist marijuana as an illegal narcotic, a week after it announced a dramatic policy U-turn just 2 years after decriminalizing it. Well, they didn't decriminalize it, they legalized it, and they haven't done a U-turn. A faction of the coalition of the government has said that they want to. They haven't said it's happening because they don't have the ability to just do that. That's another thing to bear in mind. And again, I find it almost sort of subversive, and I hate using that word, but I find it almost sort of subversive by the media, the way that they're sort of reporting this. They're not being accurate. They're saying, and I don't know if that's a desire to get clicks and they need to be sensationalistic or hyperbolic to get those clicks, but again, this is not a foregone conclusion. The government is hashing this out right now. Quoting further, quote, even as medical use, don't bring the people's plant into the system. It has been our recipe for hundreds of years. When you need licenses, there is corruption, unquote, said Prasit Chai Nunwal, Secretary General of Thailand's Cannabis Future Network. Well put. You know, I don't necessarily agree that, again, it's this whole rubric of we can't have recreational use. I am sorry. I am sick and tired of the government getting into everybody's business about what they do in their private time. Okay, that's not the role of government of a free people. The role of government of a free people is to, yeah, perhaps regulate for quality control. Yes, perhaps regulate who, again, children, you're going to jail, in my opinion. I think we need a law that says that. If you sell this product to anybody under 20 here in Thailand, you're going to do some time. That's a good idea. I'm totally for that. Regulation maybe even on sales times and things of that nature. You could probably, I could entertain the notion of that, But again, to just say, oh, well, we're going to just create new licenses out of thin air. Again, when this was delisted, there was emergency power invoked on off of a promulgated law regarding public health. None of that is in play here. And they're just saying, well, we can just do it. Well, where do you get the authority to just do it? And then again, at the end of the day, these licenses, and he brings up a good point, which is, are they just trying to do this so they can run around shaking down all these shops? Are they just talking hyperbolically like this to scare them all so that they'll be willing to pay up something? It's a good question. It's a very good question. Meanwhile, this appeal to experts, especially the medical establishment, so-called, after we spent years of economic hardship, I knew people that killed themselves because of what occurred, and that they couldn't make any money anymore. They were street vendors and things that I later found out, well, what happened to so-and-so? Well, they're gone. That was because the medical establishment told us all we had to shut down and that we had to do it because there was an exigent need. And in retrospect, we now see that there wasn't such an exigent need, and we now see that the so-called solutions pushed by that medical establishment were not exactly in the best interest of the public at large. And this is around the world. So you'll excuse me if I don't find your appeal to expertise in this situation all that compelling. What it looks to me like is perhaps some folks have been incentivized to perhaps take a position against this product because there are special interests out there that would like to see their profit margins go back to what they were before these changes occurred. That's what it looks like to me. And honestly, if I got to see this again where we go through another round of, well, the doctor said so, so now you got to go do X, Y, Z, I'm just not putting up with it.